All right. So I'll tell you maybe why I wrote this book in the first place. So there's a few things you may or may not know about me. I'm going to go with nobody knows about them because, of course, most of my feed is also in German. And I'm guessing not all of your German is quite at the level of where I write, because I'm not even sure that my level of German is where it is, where it should be. I'm born Linnie Sharma. So my grandfather is Indian. This will surprise many. And my father was actually raised in India. He lived there from when he was 5 years old to when he was 19, and then returned to become a doctor here in Germany. And then he schlepped us all the way across the globe again back in 2002. And from 2002 till 2017, I lived in Canada, various different places. I went to study there. And in the midst of all of it, I imported myself a German man who I had fallen in love with. And this is actually how I began publishing. So I brought him over. He moved into my parents' basement. We got married, all of that. And then we thought naively, well, I have permanent status in Canada. I can just marry him. And then we got a letter in the mail that said he had 30 days to leave the country. At that point, I went to a Rotary International convention. I was a Rotarian at that point, and I got to join my mother in Bangkok. And we went to travel to Goa because we hadn't been in India for quite some time. And if you're traveling anywhere outside of Canada to the other side of the world, you always want to make sure you get a few stops in because it's quite a long way to go. And by the time I got back 2 weeks later, and had given my husband some time to think about whether he wants to relocate to Germany, potentially France, because of course he's half French, or continue to fight to be in Canada, we were both pretty certain that we would put in the time to rest in Canada. And because of the immigration system, the way that it is, he wasn't allowed to work or even volunteer during the time where he was waiting for his papers, which could have taken anywhere up to a year and a half potentially, but only ended up taking 10 months. And we needed a bit of a happy project. And I had written a story about rabbits at that point. I was a he bunny, she bunny tale about how the jackrabbits came to Canada. And I called it Our Canadian Love Story. And somebody told me about crowdfunding at that point. And, we just sort of winged it. I winged it. I turned my first manuscript that I had written on 3 Air Canada air sickness bags into my first book. Learned so much about publishing, and that journey continued for me. In 2013, I published my first, and 2015, my third. And then I gave birth to our first daughter. And now recently, last year, I published another 2 books and have 1 waiting to come out. So one of the books I'm going to read to you today is called The Birds and the Bees Don't Do It. Now, being German, we are quite public about breastfeeding and nursing our young. And it was an experience that I found to be a little bit different in Canada. And I ran into more than one situations where people weren't very comfortable around me nursing my child. So I thought, how is it that in 2021, the year that it's published, but also in 2017, when I wrote this book, how is it that we still don't understand that when you are able, because certainly not all women are, to nurse your child, how could that not be the most natural, most beautiful, and most socially acceptable thing that we could possibly offer? So this is my book. I will show it to you here. I'm so sorry that we don't have a PDF for you. I hope you can see it. I wonder if I turn off the light, it might be a little bit better because we don't get a glare. But I will try to do exactly this and read this book, as well as stop to show you some of these really quaint, beautiful illustrations done by my friend Ashley O'Mara. The Birds and the Bees Don't Do It. A Milky Tale. So here we are, with our first little bee, and we're going to meet her. This is the story of Miss Henrietta Harold, better known to her hive friends as Henry. As the chief investigative reporter for the BBC, what else? Henry was a curious little honeybee with a magical sense of adventure. While her fellow honeybees busily buzzed around the orchard's petal tops to fill their pollen baskets and their nectar purses, Henry's bee brain buzzed with the who, what, when, where, whys of the beehive's tiny and large news. Just to show you the illustration. She loved writing stories in which she painted pictures of honeybees buzzing about their designated tasks, from sweeping the hive comb to feeding baby larvae, to navigating the flower fields and orchards to seek pollen and nectar. One of my favorite little illustrations I'll show you is this one here. The little baby larvae getting fed with a little nectar bottle. Her favorite story was how honeybees delivered nectar to the hive bees, which then passed it mouth to mouth until it finally became sweet, golden honey. And here they are in their own little honey factory. Can everybody hear me okay? Give me a sign of sorts if you can't, okay? One of Henry's pastimes, here's Henry on the petal tops. One of Henry's preferred pastimes was to sit on top of the peony bush and brag to her sparrow friends about all the wonderful things only honeybees do. We can make honey and beeswax and bee bread and royal jelly but before she could finish her sentence, she stopped to listen to a strange sort of suckling noise she had never heard before. What do you think she hears? The sparrow chirped with laughter and said, "Oh, Henry dear, I am certain there's one thing honeybees don't do. In fact, us birds and you bees don't do it." "And what might that be?" gasped Henry, shocked by the thought that there was anything in the world that honeybees couldn't do. Now here she is, sitting in her little peony trampoline. The sparrow pointed her wing. "Perhaps you should follow the sucking, smacking sounds and buzz underneath the petal tops to find out." Before the sparrow uttered another word, Henry swung her pollen basket into the sky, untucked her notepad from her bee visor, and sharpened her pencil in mid-flight. Let me just see if any of these. Oh, beautiful illustrations. Thank you. I'm just hearing the dings and I don't want to miss anybody. Oh, thank you. So here we are, going into a world that she's never visited before. While the sparrow kept chirping and her bee friends trampolined in the pollen, Henry slipped below the flower crowns and followed the sounds that now itched her curiosity. Now, it's so difficult to see, but I love this little world Ashley created here. So we've got, as I'm like trying to poke and see what I'm showing. So this beautiful little world. Underneath the petal roof, in a land unbeknownst to honeybees, sat Mother Mouse, 5 velvety mini mice tucked under her belly, sucking and smacking and giggling, while Mama Mouse embraced each of them closely. And now look at Mama Mouse. There she is, with all her velvety little mice. Henry never saw such an odd sight. Almost too ashamed to stare, her reporter curiosity won the better of her as she broke her silence. "Mother Mouse," she whispered, as not to disturb the scene. "What on earth is all this noise about, and what in the Queen Bee's name are you doing?" Now here's just the most magical nursery scene, if I may say so myself. Look at this little mouse on wheels. And so it continues. Mother Mouse gently pulled her littles closer and smiled. I'm feeding my babies. They're drinking my milk, and that's called nursing. We are mammals, and this is how we do it. But if you think this is amazing, you should see how the whales do it. They do it underwater. Could it be, Henry thought, that animals other than honeybees have their very own superpowers too? Henry had to find out, and so she set off to visit places near and far to uncover the story of the milky gift of nature. So here she is with her little bags packed, ready to go. Ah, the world. Remember when we used to travel it? I hope we'll get to that point again. If luck will have it, I will be in Nairobi next week, but we'll see how that goes. She visited the Pacific Ocean to watch whales do it underwater. Did you know that a baby whale drinks over a bathtub of milk each day? She buzzed to Australia to watch kangaroos do it in pouches. Did you know that each mammal's milk is magically made to nourish the needs of its babies? There it is, the little Joey in its pouch. Henry soared to Kenya to watch lions do it in prides. She flapped to Mexico to watch bats do it upside down. Did you know that Mama Bat will recognize her baby bat amongst thousands by her smell and voice alone so that she can nurse her? Did you know a lioness will nurse her friend's cubs? When one mama nurses another baby, it's called wet nursing. Again, something that used to be so popular and something that I was able to do for my nephew, quite interestingly enough. She fluttered to Greenland to watch polar bears do it on floating ice. Did you know that baby polar bears sometimes nurse as long as 30 months? There they are. They're hard to see because it's white on white. And finally, she flapped to Rwanda to watch gorillas do it while walking. Did you know they look incredibly similar to human mamas and babies when they breastfeed? And this may be my all-time favorite little illustration of the content little look on this little guy's face. I've certainly seen it before, and if any of you have ever nursed, you just might have to. That said, though, I'm not going to suggest that breast is best. Even bottle-fed babies look this happy when they're in their mama's arms. Henry flew to Switzerland to watch cows, goats, and sheep do it on open pastures. Now, did you know that some humans drink cows, goats, and sheep milk and use it to make cheese or yogurt? Finally, now, Henry returned home. And so it was that Miss Henry Harold, chief investigative reporter for the BBC, came to never again assume that honeybees were life's only royal jelly. She absolutely adored breaking the miraculously milky mammal tail to her applauding hive. She couldn't wait to follow her buzzing bee brain's desire to investigate all of life's who, what, when, where, and whys of species living far beyond the honeybee hive. The end. I got a little camera. I'll show you this little scene of everybody sitting and watching her special. And that, my darlings, was The Birds and the Bees Don't Do It, my milky tale. Thank you so much for listening. And absolutely, please feel free to ask me questions. Please feel free to ask me to show you illustrations that you may have missed. And I'll give it over to you again.
Oh, so sorry. It's so short.
Hey, I have another 5 books to read. We can just continue.
Yeah, maybe if there's another questions. Yeah. Absolutely.
I mean, we have quite a little bit of time. If you want to, I can run through actually 2 two, but one especially, before we talk about the other ones and I take your questions, but I have one called Sadly the Owl, which I think at this point couldn't be more timely. I published it in 2015 before I gave birth to my our first child, and I have lived with a diagnosis of being bipolar for the past 12 years, and I knew that at some point I would have to explain to my children what this disease is that I have and what mental illness means. And so I made up a story about Sadly the Owl, a little line dancing owl who wakes up to a cloud over his head. And it's a very innocent little story about sad days where we can't see the sun, and all the many things that we can do to try to feel better, with the understanding that usually mental illness accompanies us potentially as a chronic disease for a lifetime. And it's I've really made it such a cause for myself to very publicly and very candidly, especially with the COVID umbrella of things happening and the world really experiencing in very different boats. We are very much in the same ocean. And unfortunately, the mental health situation, especially for our children, but also for adults, has declined quite a bit with the things that we've been experiencing. And so I've really made a point of speaking quite openly about my own illness, and really encouraging people to speak out, and to dare to receive professional help. Yeah.
I would love for you to read that story if you don't mind.
Would you like to? We have time.
Yeah, if everybody agrees.
I see hearts flying. I'm going to take that as a yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
Sure.
yeah.
I'd love to share that story. Definitely. Okay, I'm getting a definitely. Absolutely. All right. I have not read this one for a long time. It doesn't exist in German yet. Now, the other one does exist in German. It was the first one that I also did in German. This one is waiting on funds for a German translation, which I hope can come through very quickly, because I get asked every single day if I can make it available to schools, to other institutions in German, but I simply haven't had the funds to do it. So Sadly the Owl, for those who do speak German, in German it will be called Heulerich der Eulerich, which is also a really pretty little title. So this, my darlings, is Little Sadly. This one was still printed in Canada. The other ones I print in Germany because I believe in printing where I am, to support local businesses and industries as much as I possibly can. And it's also illustrated by my darling friend, Ashley. So here we are. Again, lots and lots of pictures. I'll let you look at this one first. When the first ray of golden sun danced into his nest and tickled his beak, Sadly the owl opened his eyes, threw back the covers, and jumped out of bed into his flaming red line dancing boots. Like every morning, Sadly took extra care to preen his feathers and wings, and most importantly, he polished his boots until they gleamed in the prairie sunshine. They were his pride and joy. After his puddle bath, Sadly hit the play button on his favorite country music station, and before long he was clicking his heels and bobbing his head as he floated to the table on the scrumptious scent waves of Mom's crunchy cricket pancakes. Now there's Mama making breakfast. There was only one thing Sadly loved more than his shiny red line dancing boots, and that was to stride through the swinging wooden doors of the saloon and onto the dance floor, where he flexed, flicked, and fanned while he hopped, heel split, and hee-hawed. As you do, you can tell I was very much influenced by Alberta, where I was living at the time because my dad had a chair at the university there. Then one morning, everything changed. When Sadly opened his pearly owl eyes, he saw a dark cloud hovering directly over his head. And when he slipped on his boots to step into the sun's rays, the cloud floated along above his head. In the coming days, Sadly tried every trick under the sun to outsmart his cloud. He hid under his bed, but the cloud waited. He skipped to the left, but the cloud followed. He swung open the saloon doors, hoping to bat the cloud away, but it simply swooshed through the wooden cracks and settled back over his head. The cloud clearly had no intention of leaving, and the harder Sadly worked to outsmart it, the darker it grew, until one day it began raining, big splish splash raindrops down on little Sadly's head. The nest bell rang again and again as his friends begged Sadly to join in their fun. Instead of answering their pleas, poor Sadly pulled the covers over his head. What was the point if his boots no longer sparkled, his heels were too tired to click, and his wings were too wet to clap? And I just love this illustration of his friends arriving and trying to get him out of his nest. There he is, poor little Sadly. Seeing Sadly so sad, Mom phoned the wise old medicine owl, who immediately flew over with his heavy bag of magic potions. Slippers. These slippers make me very happy. He inspected Sadly's muddy red cowboy boots, poked the cloud and bounced it around, tasted a raindrop and dried Sadly's tears. He straightened his thick horn glasses before raising his wise, deep voice. Every day, Sadly must open one of the 6 notes I will leave at his bedside. And with that, he spread his wings and leapt out of the nest, leaving Sadly and Mom filled with a sprinkle of hope that things might finally get brighter. On Monday morning, Sadly opened a note. Monday, receive a cuddle, a heartfelt cuddle from someone you love and who loves you in return. From the desk of Ken Wise. Look at this, and look at little baby itty bitty Sadly there in the back. Although he felt weak, wobbly, and whiny, he dragged himself over to the mom for a heartfelt cuddle. He sure loved his mommy, and he was sure she loved him more than any owl under the prairie sun. She also didn't mind getting wet, as a few of Sadly's raindrops dampened her feathered dress. After they hugged, Sadly curiously peeked up at his cloud to find that although it had not moved, it was a little less puffy. On Tuesday morning, Sadly opened a note and read, Tuesday, leave your nest and seek the sunlight. From the desk of Ken Wise. Although he felt gloomy, gray, and groggy, Sadly hopped around his neighborhood. He saw the other animals bathing in the sunshine and remembered what life looked like before his cloud appeared. After his prairie hop, Sadly, curiously peeked up at his cloud to find that although it had not moved, it seemed a little lighter. On Wednesday morning, Sadly opened a note and read, Wednesday, go to the market and prepare yourself your favorite meal. And so off to the market he goes. Look at this little market scene with Mama, of course. Although he felt mopey, messy, and muddled, he joined Mom at the market where they bought cricket salad, worm tapenade, and bat steak. They prepared a lovely feast and Sadly remembered what life tasted like before his cloud appeared. After dinner, Sadly curiously peeked up at his cloud to find that although it had not moved, it did rain a little less. On Thursday morning, Sadly opened a note and read, Thursday, play until your feathers are fluffed. And so he did. Although he felt dull, daft, and drowsy, he joined his friends on the ski hill where his clouds rain turned to snow and Sadly remembered what life felt like before his cloud appeared. There he is rolling down the hill. After his ski adventure, sadly, curiously peeked up at his cloud to find that although it had not moved, it was a little more see-through. Turn this page here. On Friday morning, sadly opened a note and read, Friday, do something that makes you forget your cloud. Although he felt overwhelmed, overwrought, and on his own, he volunteered to play with the preschool owls at the big puddle pond. The little owls' giggly hoots filled the prairie air, and sadly remembered what life sounded like before his cloud appeared. And these little itty bitty, look at them, these little tiny owls, super cute. After his day at the puddle pond, sadly, curiously peeked up at his cloud to find that although it had not moved, it did look a little smaller. And somebody may accidentally almost be smiling again. On Saturday morning, sadly opened a note and read, Saturday, repeat all the lovely things you did this week. And tonight, when you go to bed, let your mummy tuck you in and count the stars until you sleep, sleep, sleep. That night, sadly, was so sound asleep that he didn't notice the cloud kissing him goodbye. Before leaving, it poured a final shower over his favorite red-lined dancing boots. So they would once again gleam in the prairie sun. And there it is, the cloud kissing him goodbye. The happy end for now that every little owl deserves. And that's my little story, Sadly the Owl. Yeah, so I'd love to hear some questions. I'm reading. It is interesting how you use depression shrouded over our head as to cloud in the sky, yeah, overcasted, dark, heavy, waiting to downpour. In those fickle shades of gray silver lining around the cloud, life traces us back to the sunny days. What an interesting way to tell children about mental health. Yeah, it's it really is. Again and again, I find that I use this one as a tool, and I know lots of my psychiatry friends, psychologist friends, therapist friends, they love having this in their waiting area or even using it as a tool. And it's particularly good at breaking adults open, because I think something really quite remarkable happens when we as adults are exposed to children's books, because they catch us in this beautiful, vulnerable space where we have no walls and we have no gated little communities in our heart. And children's stories, in their rawness, in their vulnerability, can catch us in such a vulnerable place and release or trigger emotions for us that we may or may not expect. And Sadly the Owl especially has really been a book that has prompted a few dear people in my life to seek help and to even begin to articulate about the sadness or the loneliness they were feeling. And I mean, I'm not saying by any stretch of the imagination that any amount of sadness always has to be a mental illness, but it's certainly, as we move forward, becoming better about articulating every single emotion in the emotional rainbow that we are gifted, will certainly allow children to be much more in tune with the entire corset of emotions, and hopefully will allow our children to seek help much sooner than so many of us do, who work and work and work and work, and then we burn out, and then maybe we address some of the issues that may have led to that. But I see, even, with my daughter, she has started practicing yoga now at 6, and I just think, if somebody had taught me to breathe that early on in my life, it would have saved me from quite a dark moment in life, or more than one. So yeah, those are some thoughts.
I love that the cloud kisses the owl at the end. What does that mean to you?
I think for me specifically, and this is me specifically, of course, really truly, having lived through many episodes of depression, I feel when it rolls in, I can disguise it. I can do all sorts of things with it for about the first 2 weeks, and say, oh, it's been exhausting, or da 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 da, whatever it is that I blame my, wanting to retreat, wanting to close curtains, wanting to sleep more. But especially as I come out of it, on the other end, which is usually about 4 to 5 weeks, really is what an episode lasts for me, of which the darkest point really is not being able to get out of bed to even shower. Luckily, my children have been a real help, in the sense that they're a true catalyst for me. I can they make me get out of bed and do certain things, but then when they are taken care of, I fade into the background and I will sleep 6 hours just to recuperate enough strength to be there then through the evening, after school, to do homework, to show up, to cook, to whatever it is that they need me to be present for. And it's the end. It's that remarkable feeling at the end where that cloud lifts, that truly teaches me something about myself every single time. It's where my darkness, which is of course a part of me, because we always have light and dark, we always have happy and sad, all those emotions coexist. But every single time that cloud kisses me goodbye, it says, it's been nice. I hope I've taught you a thing or two about the pace at which you live, about the appreciation for the happy, for the healthy, for the time in which you feel and things resonate with you. And it's something that I really truly embrace. And that's not to say that I love to be depressed. Absolutely not. I mean, the opposite. I wouldn't want that for my worst enemy. But it has led to a sort of intensified experience of happiness when things are good, and when I get to live in a way where my brain is translating emotions back to me and translating them into bodily sensations, other than, oh, I can't do this, I need to sleep and fade away. Then it's a heightened experience for me to be here and to take part in my own life. Because there have certainly been many moments where I thought that potentially I wouldn't be able to hold on. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing. That's such a wonderful answer and such a wonderful book. I think so necessary for all of us.
Yeah, and I think you said it. I mean, it really is, people always say like, oh, well, what age? And I say 2 to 99, because really, is there an age limit for books on immigration, for books on bullying, for books on depression or sadness, on things that are should be such basic human emotions, and really truly aren't, because we have been taught on so many levels to not engage too closely with them, and if we do engage with them, to not mirror them to the outside, and I can only assume what Bangladeshi culture, and I certainly know from my Indian part of the family, there are many things we do not talk about, not in public. People don't need to see them. And I know Germans for sure, we are told to not air our dirty laundry, to keep feelings in. And I've seen on so many accounts how sick that can make us. And so I can only encourage us to converse. I can encourage us to do really exactly this, to come together. And we don't need to have the answers for anything, but it's so valuable to know that an emotion that I'm feeling here in Berlin may be an emotion that you over there in Dakar have felt potentially at the same time, and that it's something that we can exchange our experience over, and maybe ideally even learn from each other. So I'm all for conversation. Just reading some notes here.
Dakar, does your daughter have any questions?
Yeah, I'd love to hear.
You're on mute in case you're speaking. And if anybody has any questions, just unmute yourself and speak.
And they don't have to be about the books. I mean, they could be about my work in general. They could be about publishing. They could be about the situation here, anything really. I mean, we're here, and I'd love to hear from you. So don't be shy. I think I've made it very clear there are very few things that are topics that are off the table now that I've let you into the darker side of me.
Do you have a pair of red boots?
You know what, I did, and they don't fit me anymore, because after pregnancy I went one size up, and that was just that little tiny bit that I can't wear them. But they're red cowboy boots, and I carried them along for the longest time. So it's time that I get a pair of red boots again. But I do have a little character that I made out of leather, and he's a little yeah, it's a little, sadly, the owl who lives here with us, and the kids are always sort of, probing his cloud.
Could I ask a question? Sorry.
Yes, please, Estella.
Yeah. I was just wondering, because you said also, you mentioned like very little is off limits. I was wondering about like how you how the story was about your mental health, and I like related to that quite a lot. I was just wondering, like, how do you navigate through that with your partner? It might be a bit too personal.
No, it's not personal at all. Actually, this is a daily discussion that we're having, especially now that I'm, telling you in Bangladesh how I'm feeling here in Berlin. And I've just started writing about Tantra experiences. So I really needed to go there again with my husband to say, what is off limits? What am I not allowed to write about that you would feel very uncomfortable with? So he knows exactly what he's in for. And, the mental health one, it's been, I told him, so he was well aware. He was well aware that I was suffering from mental illness when we got married 10 years ago. I think, however, I dare to say, you never know what that means until you experience. And even as you experience somebody living through an episode of depression, through mania, through whatever it might be, anxiety, all those different things that can happen to us, I think it's a huge shock to the system every single time. It's on his end. There's always denial. There's always a certain amount of paralysis, I would almost call it. And there's pain. There's real pain on his end every single time, because he feels so unable to help me, other than to be present and to say, I will be there at the other end. We have done this before, even when there's nothing right now that I can do other than be present. I will help you and tell you that you will come out on the other side again. And that's something that we learn with every episode. Sometimes it still takes my mother to translate, or to help out, and to take him under her wing and say, this is happening again. And no, she's not just tired because she went out once a week, or because the kids haven't been sleeping through the night. This is real, and here we are again, right? So it's fatiguing. it's fatiguing. It really is. I wish it wasn't so, but at the same time, I'm very, very blessed to be medicated, not over medicated, but medicated in exactly the right way. I've learned to not consider that a weakness. I regard that kind of medication just like somebody else would their insulin. We don't choose a type 1 diabetes. We certainly don't choose mental illness. And I think that's something to learn to speak about the stigma that we put on ourselves, because it's been so ingrained in us to stigmatize mental health, that I am usually the toughest on myself every single time this happens, and it comes with this great sense of disappointment every single time. Does that answer your question a little bit?
Yeah. No, I mean, whatever I experience, I've always had to I felt the need to over explain myself every time.
Yeah, and I think that'll remain to be the case.
Yeah.
Until we put these stories more presently out there, right? Until we hear this dialogue and until we speak about the fact. And again, I mean, there, and here somebody was saying, I think it was, Tessina, it's more simple here, you say, because you express yourself freely, and that is really exactly the thing that I hope for my daughters also, and my husband, he comes from a Catholic French background where anything you have, you tell to your priest, if anyone, right? You don't air your dirty laundry. And my daughter she said, Mama, Papa gets mad every time I cry. And I said, no, sweetheart.
Yeah.
He didn't learn to cry.
Yeah.
That was not something that was okay.
Yeah.
and you're allowed to cry, and we'll teach Papa to cry, and we'll teach Papa to cry, and
he would just leave the conversation.
And you'll see him cry, and ideally you will, right? And so I think this is a dialogue that we get to continue, and it'll take a lot of learning on all of our ends to validate emotional states in all their forms, and all their beautiful, glorious, and very dark and muddy forms. So yeah, it's a dialogue that I can't really get enough of, because I think there's so much there's so much healing in togetherness. And this is never no emotion that any of us can feel is ever a single human emotion.
Yep.
We are humans, and we all have emotions, and we don't all have those emotions at the same time, and we have various levels of them, and yet we're made of the same stuff. So there's very few things that somebody can experience that there's not somebody else who's experiencing a very similar thing. So, yeah.
Thank you for answering that.
Yeah, of course.
Really, and this whole thing was really beautiful.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it's I'm kind of surprising myself. I think I'm probably gonna go and have a good cry once I come up.
I'm holding it back.
Very emotional about getting to do this, and I haven't read, of course. I mean, back before I had kids, I used to go and read the first 3 stories in schools and in whole auditoriums, and it was so beautiful to read to children and to have that immediate feedback. And that hasn't happened for years. At first, it didn't happen because, of course, I was always sort of pregnant or nursing or, giving birth. And then, of course, COVID hit, and now we're not even allowed. We have something called den bundesweiten Vorlesetag, which is an official day of reading to children. That happened last Friday, and none of us were allowed in the schools. We weren't allowed to read. We're not allowed to go. We dropped the kids at the door and off they go. And of course, teachers don't have time to compensate all of the beautiful work that we as parents could be doing. So I really, really, really miss auditoriums of humans to have a human connection and to have sort of a live audience, because there's so much there when you read. It gives me so much pleasure to see your faces, and that I can elicit reactions with words that I've strung together at some point.
It gives us a lot of pleasure too. You have two more comments in the chat, so I'll read them out to you. There's a question.
Please.
Tabassum says, hi, it's also relatable. It's really difficult to open up during trauma triggers. Is there any suggestion you found helpful?
Oof, yeah, trauma triggers. Trauma triggers are, where to begin? Again, I think it's about creating a safe space, whatever that safe space might be, whether it be one person that you feel safe to open up to, whether it's ideally a professional, because, you know, sometimes we lean on our closest people and our pain hurts them so much that we take them on rides that they weren't quite ready for, and where we put them in situations where they're unable to help us, regardless of how much they want to. So I would always say, find whatever helpline, for the lack of a better word, you might have, where people who whether it's, you know, abuse at home, whether it's you know, sexual abuse, whether it is war, whether it is whatever it is that is your trigger, is there a community out there where people connect that have experienced similar traumas? And find that community, find that safe space, find a community where there are people. And I think, I mean, my sister was widowed 2 years ago to her husband that passed away from a fentanyl overdose, right? And so there was addiction in his family that was inherited down to him, and many things. He's from Kenya, from Nairobi, which is why we'll be flying there hopefully next week, if all goes well, to celebrate his life. He's been passed on for 3 years, left his young son, my nephew, and my lovely sister, his wife. And my sister now, in terms of, you know, when it comes to grieving, she says in the beginning it was too hard, because of course everybody's there to tell their story, and you're still dealing with your own story. You don't want to just listen to everybody else's triggers and to everybody else's things. But as you progress, you can build tools to keep your own story, and to let other people's stories be their stories, and to take what you can in exchanging and learning from each other without taking on the burden of each other's traumas, right? But I think that's a lifelong pursuit. I mean, I can only speak for myself here when I say, you know, because I write so openly and speak so openly and interview and host sessions to these things, people will give me their story. And I sometimes find, and I'm still learning to draw a line between this, you know, here's my story, I hope it helps you, but I still don't have the capacity to hear your story or to take on your story, because I also have to continue to take care of myself. So that's a lifelong pursuit. And this is where professionals come in. This is really where people come in who are trained to help you deal with your triggers, with your emotion, there's all sorts of incredible therapists, and there are incredibly able psychiatrists who can help with medication. There are so many alternative medicine ways, or alternative ways, really, I should say, that it really becomes a question of searching the one that suits you and the one that heals you or helps you heal. Looking away is probably the worst option, even though at times that's the only way of survival. right? So you can't just go sit in your pity puddle or in your trigger or and trauma puddle all day long, even when it's tempting, but to really search for connection. I hope that answers us a little bit. Oh no, nothing was inappropriate. Oh no. Now, if something that I said came across wrong, not at all. No, no, no. I really mean, please do open up. And I am learning, by the way, I'm not taking everybody's trauma. No, but so it's about sharing. It's about sharing, not inappropriate. I think that's the main thing, that nothing about your life and nothing we can share is inappropriate. It shouldn't be. We should take it from each other, but then potentially also have the strength to say, I am not the expert for that. I don't have an answer to it, but potentially try this or that, right? Because that's the only way we can go forward. So I hope that clarified any misunderstandings. Yeah. There was another question somehow, or a comment. Yeah. Are we reading it all, or should I read it out once?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead. Did you find it?
Yeah. What do you tell a traumatized person or someone grieving? What do you suggest? It's difficult for people around the mentally ill people. They expect us to talk, but if it's not the right thing, talking can do more harm than good. Yeah. Again, we're at that fine line where we're all just learning. What are the safe spaces to talk? I think one of the places that is always good to start our closest people. It doesn't mean every close person, but we all have somebody who will love us regardless, or potentially they will love us even more because we dare to speak out. And of course, I mean, loving is risking. So sharing with my mother how I'm feeling about my life, and that I'm so eternally heartbroken, I know that I'm breaking my mother's heart at that point. But I also know that my mother, in my case, my mother, will be somebody who will unconditionally allow me to weep and to fall apart, and will give me the confidence that she will be exactly there, loving me the exact same when I'm ready to stand on my 2 feet again. So it's her permission of me allowing me to continue to really be her child, but also letting me see her where she says, I don't have the answer. I don't have the answer, but I will be here every step of the way to help you search for somebody who can assist you. And finding that team of mental health experts around you is it's a frightening route, depending on where you are. Even here in Berlin, access to care has been unworldly, really. I mean, we're at the point where you can only get a therapist spot for your child if they have vocally said, I mean, really truly voiced that they are in some form or fashion suicidal. Otherwise, they won't even be seen by a therapist. And of course, we can say, you know, yes, we live privileged, you know, we live in a place where we really still have so much more than so many other places. But, and this is something that I have to drive home all the time, mental health knows no social ladder. It doesn't care if you're out in the prairie somewhere and don't have a roof over your head, and it doesn't care if you're in a penthouse. It simply doesn't, because we are humans, and this is something that our brain can do to us, and our brains can get sick just like any other part of our body. And so to permit that, and that's been one of the dialogues really that's happening here. I see friends of mine that are suffering so much, and they say, I have no right to suffer. I need to pull myself together because I have it so good. And yet you look at them and they've fallen apart and they're hurting, and they don't permit themselves because they feel that they should be grateful and that they should be strong enough. And mental health is not about being strong. So it's really, we have so much to learn. We have so much to learn, and we're just starting that conversation. So to spark this conversation and to be a part of this conversation and to learn a little bit more about this conversation every single day, and to learn a little bit more about how our brains work every single day, is something that's been quite remarkable for me. And I'll never get to the end of learning. It's our brain. Just reading another comment. So sweet. Thank you. Rohini is saying, and I agree with you about how we become toughest to yourself while we are suffering. Being struggling with extreme OCD for more than 12 years in my 24-year-old life, at a time when talking of mental illness was kind of taboo, you're surely to be seen as the other. And how we get to hear generalized view of such trauma, which has absolutely nothing to do with their reality, that is very different from the people who are suffering from it. Anyway, my heartfelt thanks to you for talking through so beautifully. Oh, yeah, you're very welcome. Again, I'm just offering my story, but the fact that, just reading this chat gives me goosebumps because you're trusting, in this very, and I'm just a stranger sitting at the other end of the world. But if a little children's book can spark exactly this kind of conversation, and this is the kind of writing that I want to do, and these are the stories that I want to read, and these are the stories I want to share with my children, with your children. I hope you share with your children, because this is what we have. This is why book clubs have always existed, because they were a moment of sharing and a moment of opening conversations about things that apply to all of us and touch all of us in some sort of form or fashion. Oh, Katrina, I love looking at your face. You've been sitting there literally since we've started, just with this really content, pretty smile on your face.
Oh, somebody said your books are like hugs, and they are. I think you've held us all very well for an hour or so, and that's a lovely way to kind of summarize the session.
That's really, oh, thank you.
You should put that out as a blurb.
Yeah. Tabassum, may I use that? May I use that on my website? I'm just rebuilding everything. And oh, yes. Okay. You'll have to tell me exactly where you live so I can get it right, so I can get your name right, and seem so incredibly international when I say Tabassum at the other end of the world says my books are like hugs. Yeah, beautiful. Oh.
Well, we'll make sure that we order the whole batch of hugs for the good library.
Yeah. I so wish I could just bring them over. So dear Goethe Institute, when you have travel budgets again, yeah, please bring me. I'm ready.
Yes.
An audience. Yes. Oh, I'm just ready to read.
We are also looking forward to that.
My darlings, thank you for creating such a beautiful and special moment for me, and with you, and yeah, to be continued. I would say invite me anytime.
We will. We will. Thank you for daring to share, and for daring to, like, changing the way things are is scary, because it means that you're putting yourself out there, and you did it, and we really appreciate it.
Wow, thank you so much.
You're on the other side of the world.
Yeah, that means a lot. It makes me feel very connected today, and I think that's something, resonance and connection are two things that have really been missing lately in the busy and in the day-to-day, and this has been very, very remarkably special.
Have a good evening, Berlin.
On that note, before you go, I'm going to take one little screenshot of your smiling little face, but now you know it's coming. I shouldn't have told you. As she switches to Goethe Institute, Shoma. No, perfect. Thank you, everybody, for taking the time, and let's stay in touch, and perhaps one day we'll meet.
Yeah, and everybody, just for a second, turn on your cameras and we'll do a screenshot. Yeah. I think like this was a nice time to spend together, and
yeah, it really was. Just now I'm gonna go chop some carrots.
However you look, it doesn't matter. Like even if you're in your PJs.
Who cares? I'm in my bedroom. I put a plant here, so you didn't know I was in it. You thought I was in my botanical garden. Tricked you.
All right. Well, thank you, Tabassum. Thank you, Lipi. Thank you for coming, and good night.
Good night.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye bye. Stay healthy. Bye.